What is going on, Lucid fans? Welcome back to Financial Journey. Today I'll give you a quick summary of things that you need to know what did happen today and how shorts are very much scared. So I'm going to go over all the stuff you need to know. Make sure you guys hit that thumbs up and subscribe. Always greatly appreciate that. And without further ado, let's get right to it. So as you can see on the intraday chart, this here was very much because of shorts. So I'll start off giving you a quick update on that. Short score is currently 86. Utilization is 100%. Shares on loan is starting to drop a little bit, but still 201 million is fairly high if you ask me. But shorts did double down today. 2.6 million shares being increased. 23.03% is the short interest, which is a percentage of the free float. So I'm sure a lot of you are asking, well, if they double down, how are they scared? It is because of actions like this. So what they did right now is this all right here was pre-market activity. So they really doubled down. I think it was almost about 3-4 million just in that aspect alone, pre-market. So they're trying to instigate a lot of fear first thing. Didn't really work in their favor, but as you can see right here, they just gave up and returned almost about 11 million shares, which this alone was what prompted that massive spike to around $12.10 or whatever it was. So definitely they are very fearful based on these types of actions. But because of the broader fear in the market of Google and various things like that, didn't necessarily work in investors' favor. So shorts were really taking advantage of that and increasing ultimately. But these actions speak volumes. My own interpretation, I'm not a financial advisor, so do your own due diligence at the end of the day. But if you do coincide that with a lot of the other information I'll share with you, such as this, definitely goes to show that something is coming for Lucid, such as this. So these are all the transactions based on the dark pool. Of course, I like to look at the dark pool because this is basically institutions trading amongst each other. And near the tail end, so after hours, there was a lot of activity. 1.5 million, 1.1, 1.49, 1.83, and I think generally speaking, it is safe to say that a lot more big money was getting in. And funny enough, my last update was kind of the opposite, saying that big money, for the most part, from what I can see, we're scaling back. But it does look like, because of it holding around the $11 range, it is a fairly good buy based on technicals now. And as well though, if you do look at, for instance, the secondary market, which is of course what typical retail investors do trade on, there was a lot more abnormal buying, and even more so big buying. So $7 million in one transaction, so that was a very good buy, and also 1.74 million. And even after hours yesterday, so 7.99, 1.66, a lot more big money has been getting in on both exchanges. So definitely a very positive thing as far as that. And when it comes down to options activity, a lot more calls. And based on the active chains, it does look like, and insinuating, anywhere from $12 to $13 is assumed for at least 1 week out. But of course, based on all options activity, this is just a little bit more sentiment. This doesn't necessarily move the price, but there was a hell of a lot of actual premiums purchased just in these two candles. So just in 5 minutes, these were roughly about $500,000 in premiums. So definitely a lot more big money is getting in, or potentially this could be shorts as well, hedging. There's obviously that option as well. But Today actually opened the season for questions. So Q4 earnings is right around the corner on February the 22nd. And this is our opportunity as retail investors to ask questions to management. So as I've done in the past, I'm going to go through some of these questions to let you know what is good and what is bad. As far as questions, because like I said, we only get roughly about 4 times a year that we can actually outright ask management anything, assuming it does get enough votes and various things. But getting right to it, is the Saudi PIF taking Lucid private? I really want to know that, to be honest, but is this a good question to ask? I don't think so, because I think it is fair to assume that Lucid is in fact going to bring this up themselves. So I don't think this is a smart decision for retail investors to actually vote on this question, because if Lucid in among itself doesn't even bring that up, well then they are completely on a different level of stupid, because any stock going up almost about 100%, they need to address. I see OTC companies addressing any abnormal activity. Why hasn't even Lucid done that? So I don't think this is a good question, but again, it's up to you guys based on that. Second one is as far as being free cash flow positive by 2025 if they're still on target. And in reality, I think that is a fairly good question, but I don't think Lucid is very well established for them to answer this question. Keep in mind, based on the actual Q3 earnings, they weren't really even established to answer what the actual targets were for 2023. So I think it is fair to say that this is a good question, but we might not get the good defined answer from Lucid. And of course, you might get Sherry or Peter potentially just going loops around the actual true answer. But again, it's something that for people to know. And this question right here is in regards to the tech race and if they're going to be moving up future models anytime soon. Based on the Q2 to the Q3 earnings, based on the wordings that they were using, it looks like if anything, they're moving things back, not necessarily moving them forward, such as that mid-size SUV in Q2. It was worded where it would be at the beginning of the decade, so around 2025, whereas in Q3 they said later in the decade. So that type of wording, it makes you and does insinuate obviously it is being pushed back, but of course I could be wrong. This is a question I think everyone and their dog wants to know about the 2 full lots of parked cars. So in reality, this is one very, very good question that I think we should know. And again, I think this is, if anything, should be the number 1 question for us to find out. If it's actually being shipped to Saudi Arabia, Europe, or overseas, what on earth is happening with that? And then is right here, is there any validity to the regarding Saudi Arabia? So I think that is more of a duplication of a question. When do reservations open for the Gravity? This unfortunately isn't a good question because they've really said over the last couple earnings, this is one of the big things that they're very excited for. And they've already said it's going to be happening in the first half of the year. So again, do we really need to waste one of our very vital questions on that to know if it's going to be in March? April, like, doesn't matter necessarily when. We know it's going to be in the first quarter. This is basically their next big catalyst, and they're really going to piggyback and kind of milk it as best as possible. And then moving on from here, obviously I'm not going to go all over the questions. Periodically on some of my videos, I'm just going to give you some highlights and once again what I see as good and bad questions. How will 2024 be funded? In reality, I think that's another stupid question because it's going to be dilution. He's even said in the last interview that he did do roughly about 2-3 months ago that there's going to be needing of billions and billions of dollars. So this is why they did that $8 billion shelf offering. They have basically 3 years to dilute as much as they want. And they only did 1.5 billion of the 8 billion. So again, how is it going to be funded? Dilution. I don't think that's an answer that people want to know. And then moving on, this will be the last question I'd kind of go over. It's about the discrepancy, about only 60% or whatever it is being physically delivered. And of course, I think this is a very good question that they do need to address. And hopefully they don't just start by rambling about some other stuff. And of course, I'm sure you guys can tell based on my tone. I absolutely love Lucid. I love their vehicles. Management, not so much. Only because every single earnings is always the same thing. They never just look at you in the eye and tell you the straight answer. They ramble about God knows what, and then he starts talking about technology, even though when the question was about production, makes absolutely no sense. And so that's always been my pet peeve about Peter. So unfortunately, not to burst your bubble when it comes down to that. Like I said, though, Lucid in general is still going to do a lot of good things. Their vehicles are, for the most part, just going to sell themselves, even with or without Peter. So I think at the end of the day, it would be amazing if Peter just looks at us in the eye and tells us the full truth about a lot of these questions. And this is why it goes back to this question right here. This is actually a fairly good question. But is Peter or Sherry capable of actually just looking at us in the eye and just telling us, hey, this is what's up. This is basically, it's not going to be 2025 anymore. It's going to be 2026. Or potentially, you know what, we're kind of reevaluated some things. It's actually going to be 2024. But once again, we just have to stay tuned for that. Let me know your thoughts on what questions you think are going to be good in the upcoming earnings that you really want to know. And as far as some technicals, I'll just go over that quickly. It is still holding up fairly well. So it's above the $11 range, which of course is that 100-day moving average. Stochastic is currently at 42, no defined trend. Number of retail investors for the most part today were actually and surprisingly getting in. So that might be a very good sign as well. But generally speaking, the fact that it's held above that $11 range is a very good sign that most likely it should continue to go up. And based on my last video as well, I did say it's just going to be wedge bound between these 2 points, most likely up until their earnings, which of course, I think that it's going to be full of good, bad, and the ugly. It's just for us as investors to really determine and scrape past all the BS to see the true answers and the full potential of Lucid. Has that changed? I don't anticipate it changing because I think in general with the PIF increasing 915 million or 51, whatever it was, $1 million in December, clearly Lucid is doing some things right behind the scenes for them to do that. But with all that said, don't forget to hit that thumbs up and subscribe. I always greatly appreciate that. If you do like my channel and support the growth, take a look at my memberships. Link in the description below, or just hit the join button at the bottom of the screen. With that said, appreciate you guys watching. Let's all make a lot of money on Lucid.